Alrighty, hello folks. Thanks for hopping on the webinar today. We will wait a few minutes as we do just want to wait for folks in case people are jumping from lunch or other meetings or whatever it might be to get into the webinar. So it looks like we're about 30 seconds past the hour. We'll give it maybe 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll get things going. Yeah, sit tight and we'll get going shortly. All right. And again, just to reiterate, for any of those who have jumped in the past, let's say minute or so, we are just going to wait another minute or so to let some other folks join before we get going so nobody misses the good stuff that is coming. Yeah. So again, sit tight. We'll be getting going shortly. Okie dokie. So we can get going slowly. All right. And because this is serious, I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see everything nice and good. So, alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you for hopping on the webinar today. Uh, Obviously, as you can see from what you're hopefully seeing now on your screens and for what you registered for, yeah, we are Safetica, and I'm John Paste, and we are going to be talking about 7 ways Safetica complements Microsoft 365 E3, or just more commonly known as Microsoft E3. So before we get going, again, hello, hi, I'm John Paste. I'm a sales engineer here at Safetica. Been with the company for a good number of years now, so very familiar with everything that we do and kind of what we're up to in general. And before we get going, some quick webinar reminders. Y'all are muted when you came in. So again, hopefully things are nice and quiet today during the recording. If anything does get unmuted at some point though, please do mute yourself or I'm sure our admin moderator will mute you otherwise. If you do have any questions, please use the questions tab, chat, whatever it might be. If you're using the go to application or via the web, I know things are a little bit different and they keep changing things. So wherever you can ask questions or find a way to ask questions, please do so. We also have some information at the very end of the webinar. If you have any sort of issues submitting questions, you can always email us or contact us in other ways. And also, the webinar is being recorded and it will be then emailed to you folks after the fact, just so you have it, can rewatch it. If you missed something, needed to go do this, that, or the other in the middle of it or something, you will have access to watch back the webinar. Okay, so without any further ado, we can get into the agenda and just really get going here. So we'll start off with who is Safetica. Then we'll get into the different ways that we do help to strengthen the existing usage of Microsoft E3, some information on how to learn more about us, and then we'll get into Q&A. Hopefully, if we do receive some questions for you folks, we'll get some of those answered, if not all. And yeah, that is about it. And we can get into who is Safetica if you are unfamiliar. So, Safetica is a global leader in intelligent data security. So, actually, the company is originally from Europe and more specifically the Czech Republic. Although over the past few years, we have shifted our headquarters to San Jose, California, where we are now evolving the solution in the company very quickly, naturally utilizing AI in many different ways within our product, and that is ever expanding. Of course, also to assist with data security, amongst many other things. We do operate around the globe, as you can see with this lovely image of the Earth. Basically, all of the darker blue sections are areas where we are deployed, where we have clients, and so on and so forth. So we capture a large majority of that. We've got over 1 million protected devices around the world in 120 plus countries, and many, many business partners that we work with as well. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the quick spiel, at least, of who we are. Naturally, you can find more information on us on our website at safetica.com. But either way, this is just a quick rundown, at least, of who we are and kind of what we are doing. So we'll start off just with a polling question as well, just for our own information out of curiosity. What are your biggest struggles in data security? We know this varies greatly from organization to organization, from industry to industry, and so on and so forth, or, country or even region, state, what have you. So yeah, please, if you can, submit whatever that might be for you folks, and we'll let that sit for a little bit and then get going again. Okie dokie. I think that should be about time for the polling question. Although I am unsure if the question is still available or not because I can just see my screen. There we go. I think something changed. Went from a yellow background or yellow outline to a green outline. So I think I'm sharing my screen again. I hope that is true for everybody. And Pauline, please, if there's something that's going on that I don't know, please let me know. But I think everything's good. So thank you for the input for, again, this first polling question, and we can get going from there. So, first and foremost, how do we complement Microsoft E3, or how can that help? So, naturally, during this webinar, we're going to talk about a number of different things. And then, of course, we'll have the assets afterwards that you can review on your own time. But one key feature, which is why we have this also as point number one here, is helping to protect data beyond, the Microsoft ecosystem or the Microsoft environment. Now, that comes in many different ways, whether it's in terms of OS based or file based, or just in other ways that Purview doesn't necessarily or has the ability to kind of capture the information or understand that information, or be able to even modify things within Purview to capture what you need to capture. For example, one use case that we hear a lot from clientele is, I use E3 for, Word docs, Excel, PowerPoint, so on and so forth. That's all fantastic. I can use my MIP labels, easy peasy. That works great. But I use a lot of text files for some reason. Or nowadays, with the, introduction, not introduction, but the more, let's say, heavy usage of AI in the workplace, there's a lot of markdown files that are created. And let's say specifically from Claude, for example. It can create, a lot of markdown files that may or may not have sensitive information in it, especially if it's your company account, you're feeding it information, and then it spits out this, that, or the other. And again, whether it's in Markdown, or it could be a TXT file, could be also, HTML, or just some other, versions of data that's not necessarily covered by Microsoft. That's a big gap. And, it is what it is in terms of how it is with Microsoft. But again, that's why folks do tend to come to us for the assistance of covering these other data sets. Because again, with Microsoft does a great job at dealing with the Microsoft ecosystem. But once you fall outside of that, that's where things can become a little bit complicated. And historically, a lot of the use case would come from, for example, CAD files as we have up on the screen here. Generally speaking, CAD files are quite sensitive. That is, an organization's proprietary design information for something that they produce. They don't want it, leaking and going somewhere and seeing it maybe, produced a week or two before they're actually about to launch something. Maybe somebody else got the drawings and they sent it to their producer and they got things fast tracked and, to beat them to market or whatever it might be. We've dealt with clients that have had these sort of issues before. This is not anything that's made up. This does happen. And this is why, again, folks tend to, come to us to help fill these gaps because, again, to reiterate, Microsoft's great at dealing with Microsoft things. As soon as you fall outside of that, it can be a bit of an issue. And again, that's where we come in to help because, again, we are deployed on the endpoint itself. We are able to analyze the files on the machines themselves when the data is in rest or right at rest, in use, and in motion. So we're covering all these scenarios and also in terms of looking into files that are maybe not so easy to look into, for example, PDFs or images, utilizing OCR to inspect those files more deeply. And we can also do other things like set multiple character sets and so on and so forth to really be able to analyze a wide range of data. So it really does help organizations to have a combination of these things. And generally speaking, in a lot of workplaces nowadays, E3 is just kind of a standard that comes with your stack, and fantastic. Use it as you can to the most, of course, get the most for your money, right? When utilizing the Microsoft solution, but once you've gotten to that point, it is a good idea to look for some other solutions to help fill those gaps, and we're definitely here to help with that. Moving on to the second point, a unified view of data activity across different areas. And again, I'm going to say this probably many times during the webinar today, but Microsoft's great at dealing with Microsoft things. So if it is, again, your Word doc, Excel sheets, and so on and so forth, either on the endpoints or if it's within SharePoint, again, you got a good admin trail being able to see who downloaded what or accessed what or modified this or did so on and so with all these different files and different things across, again, the different environments. But some things that can be a little tricky sometimes is also looking into the activity where maybe maybe it's a BYOD device or something like this, remote workers, unmanaged devices, and all that jazz. And it can also dive for kind of more deeply into not necessarily just the data usage, but what else are people doing on the machines? Because within the Microsoft solution, you can potentially again have some visibility into who accessed this, that, or the other, who downloaded this, that, or the other from certain areas. But with also utilizing our solution, when you do sync up with the 365 tenant, we're actually pulling a lot of information also from the 365 environment into our product. So we also have the ability to see who is attempting to share data, from the 365 environment, or who is downloading data from the, your 365 environment onto some machine. It could be an unknown machine, could be somebody working at a coffee shop or something like this, logged into your Microsoft accounts and potentially downloading data onto, again, a unmanaged and unknown device. This is again something that we have seen historically, and then with our product, just to be very clear and candid, there's nothing that we can necessarily do to restrict somebody from downloading your SharePoint data onto a unmanaged device. We need to be present on the machine to have visibility, full visibility and full control. We still have visibility, but not necessarily the control on the unmanaged solutions. But you can leverage Microsoft further in terms of using Intune to lock down where basically data can be accessed, or also where it can be downloaded to. So that's also something really important just to look into potentially if you're not super aware of that. But when you utilize Intune to the fullest, it can help a lot also with unmanaged devices and let's say, access to data on machines where it should not be accessed. But getting back to the point, we are able to basically help you understand where your data is going, who's doing what with the data across a number of different areas, not just specifically within the cloud or just specifically on the endpoint or something along those lines. We are going to be monitoring both of those things together. And again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we are looking at the data at rest, the data in use, and the data in motion. So all those areas that we are covering as well. And again, helping to complement Microsoft here. So we'll get on to now the, let's say, third topic here, strong insider risk. So this is also something where Safetica in the past, let's say 3-4 years, has beefed up a lot in terms of the insider risk side of things. Historically, the product was more so a kind of a pure DLP play to a degree, with some UABA monitoring in terms of just seeing who's using, what applications and what websites and things along those lines. But we have evolved that quite a bit in the past few years, where nowadays it is getting more towards the sense where we can, get deployed into an environment and really get a quite granular view in terms of, who's doing what on their machines. Is this normal behavior for the users, or are they, all of a sudden they veer off into other directions and are doing some very abnormal things here and there, or do they just consistently do a very wide range of things on their machines? And that can be sometimes a little difficult to understand what is truly okay and not. But again, it helps to dive further into these things and really understand what user is doing what, and then being able to associate risk to the different actions that the users are doing, again, based on the profile for the specific users. And again, within the Microsoft suite, I'm not necessarily certain how deep they go in terms of insider risk detection and all that jazz, again, without going to an E5. But again, this is where we can help to complement. We do provide a great view of the just general overall application usage in the environment, showing off the essentially the top applications used for the whole company, just from most used to least in terms of hours. Then we can also go in and filter on a per user basis and see, okay, how does this individual work versus this? Are they primarily just using browser based things, which a lot of people are doing nowadays, or are they still using more so the application based, and then going, further and further down kind of the rabbit hole there. Especially when you get into the website of things, then we can go into the different sites, of course, that are being accessed, and how is it being accessed and when, and so on and so forth. And again, this all helps, all of this data at least helps to build that baseline within our product to understand what is normal versus abnormal behavior. Naturally, this takes time to build up, but once we have it, it is very helpful in a number of different ways. It's kind of, let's say, silent AI in the product. But again, really helps to pinpoint these things. And we do also have a specific area in the solution which paints a picture in terms of the overall business usage within the environment, the non-business usage, suspicious, and then just anything that is uncategorized to look into as well. So again, this is just kind of a piece that's not necessarily covered as much within the E3 side of things, and it really helps to just, again, complete that, say, data security posture within the environment to really get an understanding of who's doing what, how are things being accessed, and again, just to get a better handle of what's going on in the environment as a whole. All right, so we'll get to polling question 2 now. Are you planning or thinking about moving to E5? We speak with a lot of clients that are right on the edge of switching. And again, when we have the conversations and, when we go over the features and functionality and capabilities and so on and so forth, even after going with Safetica, some still, go to E5 for other reasons, because there are, of course, legitimate reasons to move to E5 for some other capabilities that it provides. And you can still, of course, use Safetica side by side with that. No problem at all. Still provides great value, but it can also save organizations a lot of money if they were purely just thinking about moving to an E5. And instead utilize your existing E3 to the fullest, as well as having Safetica in place in the environment, again, can help a lot. in terms of either just configuration or dealing with things within the Microsoft solution, and in terms of a monetary sense as well. Generally speaking, of course, this can vary region per region, but still. Alrighty. Looks like we are good to go. Thank you, folks, for your feedback, and we can continue. So, on to, let's say, point number 4 here, smarter data classification. So, again, the Microsoft's tool can be great when it comes to its pre-built classifications. Some find it very helpful, but again, from dealing with many clientele that have been using Microsoft historically, sometimes some can find it to be a bit cumbersome to utilize or to modify or to create new classifications, if that's even a possibility, again, depending on kind of the usage of the environment or the exact license that is had. And if you just need to look for, CCPA or PII or PCI DSS related information, some of the basic things, again, it can be easy enough just to utilize Microsoft and it'll do the job. But especially if you store the data in maybe different ways or different formats, if, for example, like a social security number, if it doesn't have a hyphen or something like that, or it can also be the credit cards and stuff like this, or again, there's just some other structure to it that is kind of a little bit different than the norm, that can confuse it. It can be quite the problem or quite the nuisance to reconfigure the Microsoft solution to kind of get it to do what you want it to do. And again, a lot of folks like to use, a certain subset or a certain set of classifications from Microsoft, or just using like MIP labels and things like this, where the users can classify things as they need to. Fantastic. And then for other data classification needs, they can then utilize the Safetica solution. And additionally, if you want to, within the Safetica product, there is the option to also utilize the existing 365, or rather the MIP labels that have been created from Microsoft. This also applies to any other data classification that uses metadata tags. It doesn't have to be just Microsoft, although when you do synchronize the 365 tenant, we are pulling in those MIP labels automatically, which can make things very simple and straightforward in terms of automatically just having all of your classifications into Safetica. And then you can also, manage, if they're allowed to go here or there, or different notifications you might be getting on endpoints or whatever it might be. You can still manage these things from like a singular place in terms of the policy actions. When you have your MIP labels, as well as maybe any classifications that are created by Safetica. We do have some, of course, a number of them which are by default in the product. You can then create your own custom classifications using a number of different things, whether it be, again, just simple keywords or regex. Could also be looking for encrypted information or password protected information on endpoints. That's kind of a fun one, a little bit different. Then you can also classify based off of the where it is stored, either on the endpoint itself or on like a file server or something like that within the network. You can also do it on the application that the information comes from, the URL it's downloaded from, even like the file name. If if the organization classifies, or rather has a specific naming convention for files, we can also classify data that way. A lot of fun ways. You can also find all of that information, if I missed anything, which I probably did, on our knowledge base. But anyways, the moral to the story here is, again, Microsoft can be great with their data classification in certain ways. And again, utilizing it with the MIP labels, where again users are selecting the different sensitivities. Fantastic. We can import those things again into our product to have it nice and unified. That's nice and simple and straightforward. And actually, beyond this, something that we are going to be introducing shortly has to do with AI and data classification. I'm sure you can put two and two together potentially here, and maybe what that may or may not mean. But that is something interesting that we are working on. And yeah, anyways, we'll see about that shortly. But that's going to be something very interesting as well, again, to enhance the data classification capabilities. And again, if you are using an existing Microsoft E3 license, this can just help to enhance your data classification within your environment quite a lot. And again, as mentioned prior, it is, or rather, we are classifying data at rest, in use, and in motion. So if the data is just your has been sitting around on the endpoints for a few months, years, whatever it might be, as let's say somebody's downloads folder, right? um, Probably hasn't been touched or cleaned up, generally speaking, for quite a while. Maybe people have been downloading stuff there that's been, sitting there for, again, years. Very well, there could be some sensitive information, depending on, of course, how the organization deems, sensitivity. But that is what we find a lot when we are deploying out to clients' environments and we're doing the scans of the endpoints. We do find a lot of fun things that just reside in, the downloads folder that nobody has touched in 2 years, but can still contain a lot of sensitive information. So yeah, anyway, just a better, smarter way to do classification, and even smarter coming shortly. So, getting into then point number 5 here, talking about seamless Microsoft Purview integration. So, this is what I've kind of alluded to or referenced a few times so far. So, within the product as well. And again, depends. There's many different ways that you can use the Safetica solution, and there's many different ways that you can use the Microsoft Purview integration and just the Microsoft integration in general. But in a simplistic sense, when you are provided with the Safetica solution, there is the option to sync up with the Microsoft 365 tenant. Once you sync up with your tenant, there are going to be a number of options in terms of what you can do from there. As I mentioned, you're going to be pulling in those sensitivity labels automatically once that integration is configured, which is great. And then there are also additional configurations that can be made, such as setting up the Exchange integration so that we capture all the information regarding email traffic within the environment. And then there's also Outlook integration specifically, which helps to deal with emails as well, to inspect the body, subject, attachments, the recipients, all that good stuff, to make sure that, again, data is going where it should be and it's not going where it shouldn't go. And then lastly is going to be SharePoint integration to, again, deal with some things that are mentioned here as well in terms of restricting people from, sharing sensitive data outside the company environment. So, for example, if somebody is in SharePoint and they're dealing with some, sensitive document, and they attempt to share said document, via, the Microsoft tool, then you'll be able to either just block that share action, or can recall it also at a later point in time. If we realize after the fact, whoops, something was done that shouldn't have been done, you can also recall that and cancel the link, essentially. So another fun one that we can deal with, again, in combination with Microsoft here. But yeah, when we do have the Purview integration configured, or rather, if you are using the MIP labels and all that within Microsoft, that is really kind of the sweet spot when dealing with these two products, because having those two things, again, in one place really helps in terms of consolidating. Having a single pane of glass, I like that term, even though it's a little bit old, but still, it helps a lot for a lot of organizations. All right. Getting on to faster time to value. This is a really big one, and I'm sure anybody here probably thinks the same. A lot of times when we're speaking with folks, we'll hear, I was speaking with so and so about deploying Purview into my environment, or rather deploying, E3 further, using it to the most, or even dealing with an E5 or whatever it might be. And been quoted 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever crazy number of hours to get it fully implemented, fully like tuned up and good to go. That's a lot for your standard clients, at least standard clients that we're dealing with. We tend to work with a lot of clients where they'll either, it could even be a one-man show for IT, or it could be a team of 10 or whatever it might be, but really there's never enough, as it unfortunately tends to be. Never enough people to help support the business in an IT sense to really deal with everything that needs to be dealt with in a timely fashion. You always kind of have to put something off to the side to work on something else. There's always just the order of importance, and not everything can be dealt with immediately. But with the Safetica solution, this helps immensely. You can see this also in a lot of our, G2 reviews or Gartner Peer Insights, or I'm missing the other one, SourceForge reviews from, again, people that are using the product. The ease of use and just the fast time to value that the platform offers is immensely helpful, rather than banging your head against the table and trying to deal with some of those things that Microsoft makes you do for 20, 30, 40, 50 hours, whatever it might be. You can generally get these things done within the Safetica platform in a tenth of the time. Not always, of course, but still it takes much, 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 much less time and effort and energy and sweat and tears to configure and deal with these sort of things within the Safetica solution than it does within that Microsoft product. And also another thing with the time to value, and this is kind of time to value, but kind of not. It can help also just reduce your dependency on a single vendor. It's kind of like with the stock market. You don't want to just pick one thing forever and hope that it works out. You maybe want to diversify a little bit. So again, that's why it can work nicely, again, using the Microsoft product, of course, for many different things, but maybe for some other aspects of security in the environment might make sense to diversify, for the future. So yeah, faster time to value and a little bit of something else. Oh, look at that. Actually, I got into my last slide a little too early. So security, diversification, and redundancy. Well, I more or less just covered that. So I think we're all on the same page here. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And on top of that, even, you know, if the security features were one to one, or something along those lines with Microsoft, and you could go either with Microsoft or with Safetica, it would probably make sense to just stick with a single vendor because it's just easy and simple to use and so on and so forth. But that's not necessarily the case. You can do, again, certain things as we've discussed throughout the webinar today with the Microsoft product, but there are limitations that the Microsoft solution has, and of course, there's also cost in terms of going up to the higher tier, which may offer these things. But then there's also the time it is going to take to understand, to just figure out how to work with, to implement, to train other people on dealing with it, and so on and so forth. Whereas, again, if you utilize your Microsoft for what you've been using it for, it's doing a good job doing whatever it's been doing. Then you can also deal with solutions such as the Safetica solution to help you broaden your horizons with your DLP side of things, also with the insider risk, and a number of other things that the product is dealing with. It just, again, the whole time to value thing is huge. Gas gets sped up immensely, and you're also, again, diversifying in one go. It's not that you have to, again, still buy like 3, 4 different products to cover external device control or web control, app control, data classification, and then of course the data exfiltration, email going out protection, and all that stuff. It's all just in a singular product to make things nice and simple. I know that we're hitting around the half-hour mark, which I know is kind of what we were aiming for today. So I believe this is my last point, at least to talk about for today. Yep. And last but not least, why Safetica plus Microsoft 365 E3? I know I've been talking a lot about, Microsoft is not so great for this, that, and the other. And it's not to slam Microsoft in any sort of way. Microsoft does a number of things very well. It's just that sometimes the cost, the time, the energy, effort, and so on and so forth of moving to the E5 license is not necessarily worth it when there are other options out there, such as the Safetica solution. And when you're bundling Safetica along with an E5 or E3, it can provide immense value. And also along with an E5, it doesn't just have to be E3, but naturally it all comes down to what you need in terms of your data security. I'm not going to make a blanket statement saying that safety is going to solve all of your problems. Depends on your problems, but still, we can help for the vast majority of them. And again, providing broader coverage, deeper insight, and just stronger insider risk control, data classification, so on and so forth. And again, we are a modern solution built for modern organizations, and we're only getting better from here on out. So, if you want to learn more, number of ways to do so. We've got, of course, our website. You can go to safetica.com, find a lot of good stuff there, depending on what you want. Also, from there, if you go to the very bottom of the page, I believe at least, or go to contact, you should be able to find the Safetica LinkedIn page, or you just search for it in Google, DuckDuckGo, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you want to use to find our LinkedIn page, or you just simply use the URL here. If you want to book a demo with us as well, we do have a specific demo page for that. And we do also have a product walkthrough, a little kind of interactive thing you can click through to get an idea of the product before seeing it on a demo or something like that. That last link or the QR code will bring you to those, I believe. Yeah, so that's a quick bit on how to learn more. And lastly, if you want to read more on this topic in general, we do have kind of a more in-depth, let's say, paper on this. And yeah, you can download this now in the material section of the webinar. I think it may be sent after the fact as well, but either way, yeah, make sure you can download that now just so that you have it. And last but not least, questions. If anybody has anything, and also if you do want to contact me for any which reason, you got my email on the bottom here. Please feel free to shoot me over something. If you got any questions or want to have a chat or whatever it might be, let me know. But
Jeff,
yeah, and I have no idea if we have any questions
we
in the
do.
chat.
We do.
Nope.
Yes, we do.
Ah, we do. Great.
Yes. I will read them out loud. Um,
Perfect.
we have a few actually. We have about 6 or 7
Ah,
questions.
cool.
Is CAD support new-ish? This is a question from Scott.
It is not new-ish. We have had the support for CAD files for quite a while. Since I've been here, and I've been here nearly 5 years now. So, no, we've had support for CAD for a while. It really, honestly, doesn't matter the file extensions of the files. If you got your CAD files, and I'm going to say, let's say step files, because I like 3D printing. But for step files, you can just say, dot step, and then we'll find any step files that you have in the environment, or you can combine that with a file path location or downloaded from or exported out of or whatever it might be to help refine that classification. But no, nothing new. It's been around for a while, at least for us.
Thank you. We have a question from Jeffrey.
Uh-huh.
Does Microsoft E3 cover endpoint with enforcement controls to prevent sensitive info being transferred via printers, USB
Ooh,
devices, or third-party storage solutions, Dropbox,
ooh,
etc.?
that's a fun one. Um, I am honestly not 100% sure on all of those things. I know it depends on the kind of data that it is. For kind of data upload off of the environment into like a web browser or something like that, I believe, yes, Microsoft can help, but again, using certain classifications depending. For printing, I don't believe they have support for that. We do, and the whole printing one is kind of a fun one. We get asked about it more often than one would think. But yeah, we help restricting printing, which is again, it's a really interesting one, somewhat niche, but we've been getting asked about it more and more recently. But to kind of get back to the point, I would do potentially more research specifically depending on the specific tier or license type you're looking to get. I'm not a million percent sure on the specific capabilities of the Microsoft solution.
Another question from Jeffrey.
Mhm.
Would all organization users need to be assigned an E3, E5 license to leverage the Microsoft Purview DLP capabilities?
So I think I know what you're getting at here, but In terms of the capabilities that are linked to Microsoft, so really what we're going to be doing in terms of helping with that is again with the sensitivity labels and all these sort of things. And theoretically, no, like the users themselves don't necessarily have to have whatever licensing for Microsoft. It's just as long as you have these ways to identify the data at least from certain users, or maybe admins can do it or whatever it might be for MIP labels. Not all users would have to necessarily have some top tier Microsoft account. We're just again reading the metadata on the files. It doesn't really matter if the user is an E3 or E5 or business or whoever they may be.
Another question from Jeffrey. Does
Uh-huh.
Microsoft DLP DSPM solution have data lineage and capabilities to remove duplicated sensitive data or restrict users' access to sensitive data?
So for the micro, could you reiterate that again? Sorry.
Does Microsoft DLP DSPM solution have data lineage and capabilities
Okay.
to remove duplicated sensitive data or restrict users' access to sensitive data?
Right. I don't believe so for the data lineage piece. Yeah, I don't believe so. And then also in terms of the duplicate side of things, that potentially where you just might be able to scan for the data and say, hey, we found duplicates of this data. I honestly wouldn't be super surprised if that was something that they are dealing with. I don't know specifically, but it kind of seems logical. But in terms of the data lineage, I don't think so. I haven't heard anybody mention anything about data lineage and Microsoft. I've heard it mentioned for other solutions, but not for Microsoft. But
Thank,
again, you could maybe do your own. Do some research. I don't want to say it's something incorrect.
thank you, John. There is one last question, I believe, from Jeffrey. What
Mhm.
is the difference between E3, E5, and the latest license announced, E7?
Ooh, I don't know much about E7. But in terms of E3, I would say E3 is going to be kind of your starting point for a lot of organizations, of course, depending on size. We deal with a number that also just have like a business license. Um, E3 is going to help and cover, let's say, the majority of the Office files that you're dealing with in your environment. Is going to also help do some scanning within SharePoint. It also is going to help with your, let's say, standard data classifications. You can do some somewhat basic, modifications to classifications and all these sort of things. And again, it's kind of it's a halfway point with the, that Microsoft ecosystem where gives you the access to do a lot of things, but it still is restricting you from doing, everything that it can do. And then once you jump to the E5, really the biggest thing, at least that we see or we hear from folks in terms of what that gives them, it's more features and control in terms of also like the Microsoft Defender side of things, which is more like your AV, EDR, XDR, so on and so forth kind of thing, which is we're not involved in that. But still, that's one thing I know that Microsoft helps with there. Also expands upon the capabilities in terms of the file sets that they deal with, but still there are limitations like for CAD, I know for whatever reason that they have issues with that. And there's again, I'm not the Microsoft, let's say, expert, forever here regarding these sort of things, but generally speaking, what we hear is expanding upon the data classification possibilities, expanding upon other areas in the Microsoft suite, like Defender, and also including some things up in SharePoint and in enhanced data classification within that side of things. But still, I would recommend, doing your own research on this to identify, the areas specifically that are important to you. And then, of course, feel free to reach out to us, and then we can talk about kind of, apples to apples about what you really need.
A question from Shabil.
Mhm.
Can Safetica discover the MIP label files on endpoints?
Yeah. So really for the MIP labels, when you sync up with the 365 tenant, we're going to pull in those MIP labels automatically. But if you're, for whatever reason, you do not sync up with a tenant, we will still need the label. You can input these labels manually into the product, so you don't have to sync up with a tenant to do it, but we will need to have that sensitivity label copied and pasted essentially, and it can be done through the terminal, and then you can put that into the data classification to then make sure that we see it on the endpoints.
Thank you, John. Another question from
Mhm.
Shabil. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Compliance requires MIP confidential documents to be encrypted while sending to external users.
Mhm.
How can we achieve this with Safetica?
Right. So within the Safetica solution, there is currently no encryption. We can see, for example, if there is has a file that has a specific MIP label, for example, let's say it's a TXT file that has whatever it might have in it, and we've classified that file, and let's say also Microsoft classified the file has an MIP label on it. Um, if you encrypt that file and then send it out, we still have visibility of what's being sent because we saw the encryption occur on the endpoint. If it was encrypted, in an area where we are not present, then we do not know what's in that file because we cannot break the encryption. But if we're on an endpoint where the encryption happens, then we know what is in that file, and therefore we know when it's being sent and where it's being sent, and has the ability to then restrict or not, depending. But we are not doing the encryption. But there are many other methods in terms of, if you need to encrypt the files or the emails themselves. But that is something that Safetica itself does not deal with.
And we have one last question from
Yep.
Jeffrey. Would leveraging a third-party DSPM or DLP solution be enough instead of leveraging Microsoft Purview due to limited expertise
Mm.
and time of implementation configuration?
Yeah. I mean, again, it depends on your specific use case and needs, but we have a lot of folks who have utilized other, DSPM or data classification or whatever it might be solutions on top of using Safetica for, other specific areas where maybe Safetica doesn't have the, uh, depth of, knowledge in a certain maybe OS or a certain, storage warehouse of data, whatever it might be. Yeah, so you can, as long as whatever other solution is using metadata tags, we can read those tags, and then you can basically just have the entire library of all the classifications from another product in Safetica. And then when we see that data flying around on the endpoints and trying to go places it shouldn't, we can then restrict that data from moving, wherever it's going to be moving. So yeah, that can definitely work.
And I think that was it. Oh no, is there a new question that came in? Yes. Do all DLP solutions can enforce controls, governance, and unauthorized AI tools?
Yeah, so for our products, we do have the ability to basically categorize the applications into, business, non-business usage first and foremost. So for example, if you're using some tool that's good for, you guys to use, fantastic, you can mark that as business, and other things can be non-business. That's an easy way to differentiate. But additionally, we have the ability to restrict the access to, in general, specific applications or specific websites. So we can either use the executables or the category that they fall under to, categorize them one way or another, and then to either restrict or allow based on the specific executable or the category that the application falls under. Similar for websites, we can restrict certain URLs from being accessed, or we can restrict certain categories of websites from being accessed.
Okay, I don't see any more question. I think we covered everything,
Okie dokie.
and I will let you close the webinar, John.
Cool. Sounds good. Alrighty. Well, thank you folks very much for your attention here today. And of course, just for hanging around with us for about 45 minutes or so. And thank you very much for the questions. I mean, that wraps it up for today. I think that's the end of my slideshow here. Yep. So again, thank you folks for joining. You will get a recording of this webinar. Also, please feel free to download any materials that you would like from the resources section of the webinar. And yeah, if you also want to have a chat with us, please feel free to shoot me an email, go on our website, submit a demo request, or whatever you want to do in terms of that. And yeah, we'll be speaking to you folks soon. But again, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you all next time.